Welcome to Cozy Side Audio, where every story pulls you deeper. If you like the thrill, the mystery, and the chase, like, share, and subscribe before the next clue disappears. Cozy Side Audio presents The Elevator Number. Chapter 1. The Ordinary Building. The building wasn't much to look at from the outside. Glass and steel like 100 others on the same crowded avenue, it rose 30-odd stories above the sidewalk, humming with the anonymous industry of insurance adjusters and office clerks. If you passed it on your way to somewhere more interesting, you wouldn't give it a second glance. It was the kind of place that existed to be ignored, to stand invisibly while the city thundered past around it. Inside, it was even less remarkable. Beige walls, carpet tiles worn threadbare in the hallways, elevators that dinged with the same tired sound whether it was 8 in the morning or 8 at night. A smell of reheated coffee and paper left too long in printers hung in the air. The hum of fluorescent lights was constant, and if you sat still long enough in the lobby, you could feel the whole building breathing with the weight of thousands of busy, ordinary lives. Lena Morales had been coming here for as long as she could remember. Her mother worked on the 14th floor for a medical billing company, and Lena sometimes tagged along after school when her mother had to stay late. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a place with free Wi-Fi, air conditioning, and vending machines stocked with the kind of snacks her mother rarely let her buy at home. On that Thursday afternoon in October, the three of them, Lena, Marcus Anderson, and Ava Wilson, spread themselves across the worn lobby chairs like they owned the place. Lena had her backpack open, geometry homework balanced on her knees. Ava was sketching in the spiral notebook she carried everywhere, her hair falling like a curtain to hide her work from prying eyes. Marcus had snagged a bag of sour gummies from the vending machine and was chewing with the loud satisfaction of someone who knew it annoyed his friends. "Seriously," Marcus said around a mouthful of neon green candy, "if you make me sit in this beige graveyard one more day, Lena, I'm gonna lose it. You know they call places like this cubicle farms? I can practically hear the cows mooing." Lena didn't look up from her geometry. "Then stop coming. Nobody asked you to be here." "Please, like I'd leave you and Ava alone to be consumed by the soul-sucking void of medical billing. I'm doing a service. I'm basically a hero." Ava smiled faintly, though she didn't look up from her drawing. Heroes usually don't eat an entire bag of sugar in one sitting. "It's called fuel," Marcus said. He held up another gummy like it was evidence. "Brain food, essential to survival." Lena snorted and drew a line across her paper. Truth was, she didn't mind them being there. Homework was always easier when her friends were around, even when Marcus filled the air with his nonsense. Ava balanced him out, quiet, thoughtful, with a knack for listening. They were the kind of trio that made sense only to themselves. The lobby doors hissed open, letting in a gust of cool air and a man in a gray suit carrying a briefcase. He didn't glance at them. Nobody ever did. To the steady river of adults flowing in and out of the building, Lena and her friends were background noise, three teenagers wasting time. The man pressed the elevator button and stood waiting. The nearest set of chrome doors slid open with a ding, spilling yellow light across the lobby. He stepped inside without hesitation, vanished into the box, and was gone. "See," Marcus said, consumed by the void. "That guy's soul just got filed under lost causes." "Maybe he has kids to feed," Ava murmured. She shaded the corner of her page, pencil moving with soft determination. Lena glanced at the elevators, 4 of them in a neat row against the far wall. She'd stared at them 1,000 times before. But today, something seemed different. It was just for a second, but as the doors closed on one of the elevators, she thought she saw another outline behind it. A second set of doors reflected faintly in the chrome, as though there was a 5th elevator standing just to the side. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, and the illusion vanished. Only the 4, humming and ordinary, stood there. She tried to shake it off, bending back over her homework, but the image nagged at her like an itch she couldn't scratch. "Did you see that?" she wanted to ask, but Marcus would laugh and Ava would probably give her one of those looks that meant she didn't want to say the wrong thing. So Lena said nothing. Time dripped by in the way it only does in office buildings. The clock on the wall made slow, deliberate ticks. Workers passed through the lobby, mostly ignoring the trio in the corner. Lena chewed her pencil and tried to focus on triangles. Ava turned the page in her sketchbook. careful not to smudge the charcoal lines. Marcus slouched further down in his chair until he nearly slid onto the carpet. It was Marcus who noticed it next. "Hey," he said suddenly, sitting up straighter. His voice had lost its usual joking lilt. "You guys see that?" "What?" Lena asked, relief washing through her. She hadn't imagined it. "Over there?" Marcus pointed, a sticky green fingerprint smudging the air. "Near the elevators. Tell me I'm not going crazy." Ava lifted her head. Her eyes followed his finger. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the chrome doors, closed and waiting. Then a flicker, like a trick of the light. A shadow, tall and rectangular, as if another set of doors stood a little apart from the rest. But when Lena looked directly at it, the shape dissolved, leaving only the bland beige wall. "I saw it," Ava said softly. Her voice was quiet but sure. Marcus grinned, but it was uneasy. His bravado stretched thin. "Okay, good, so we're all crazy together. That's something." Lena set her pencil down. Her heart thudded harder than it should. "It's probably just the light, reflection, or something." "Sure," Marcus said. "A reflection that looks like an elevator nobody's ever used. Totally normal." They sat in silence for a while after that, pretending to be absorbed in their separate tasks. But the air felt heavier, like the building itself was listening. Every time one of the real elevators dinged and opened, Lena jumped. By the time Lena's mother texted that she'd be another hour, none of them had done much of anything. The homework lay unfinished, Ava's sketchbook closed. Marcus had eaten the last of his gummies without comment. When the lobby was empty, except for them, the shadow flickered again. Longer this time, more distinct. The faint outline of doors, there and not there, waiting in the corner where no elevator should exist. "Tell me you guys see it now," Marcus whispered. Lena's mouth went dry. Ava reached for her hand under the table, her fingers cold. This time, none of them tried to pretend it wasn't real. Chapter 2. The Elevator. The next morning, the attic door looked different. It shouldn't have. It was just the same panel of warped wood, painted over 3 times in the past 40 years by Mrs. Wilcox, the landlord who owned half the block. But as Marcus Anderson stood at the foot of the narrow staircase, rubbing sleep from his eyes, the door seemed to hold its breath. It was swollen slightly in the frame, as though the shadows behind it pressed forward, eager to spill into the hallway. He swallowed and glanced back at Ava Wilson, who hovered by the banister, her hands tight around the rails as if ready to bolt at the first creak. Next to her, Noah Bennett adjusted his backpack straps and said, with forced casualness, "So, are we actually doing this, or are we going to stand here all day looking at a door?" Marcus wanted to laugh, but the sound wouldn't come. Instead, he placed his palm flat on the peeling paint. The wood was cool, as if it had been waiting. He pushed. The hinges squealed like some small animal caught in a trap, but the door swung open with ease. The attic yawned above them, hot and dim, dust hanging in lazy sunbeams. "Same as last night?" Ava whispered. Her eyes flicked from the tilted boxes to the slanted ceiling to the tall, strange shape at the far end. The freestanding elevator with its tarnished brass doors. Even in daylight, it looked wrong. "Maybe we dreamed it," Noah muttered, though his voice cracked halfway through. Like one of those shared dreams people talk about. Collective imagination. "Then why is it still here?" Ava asked. Noah had no answer. The elevator loomed silently, an iron relic that had no business in an attic. It wasn't connected to anything. No cables, no machinery, no shaft. Just a box with brass doors and a call button tarnished green. Marcus felt his heart thudding. "We have to know." "Know what?" Ava demanded. "Where it goes." Noah barked a laugh that was too sharp. "You're insane. That thing's probably full of spiders. Or rats. Or... It doesn't even make sense. Elevators go up and down. We're already at the top of the house. Where would it even take us?" Marcus stepped closer, brushing past cobwebs. He couldn't explain it, but the elevator seemed to lean toward him as if recognizing him. I feel like we're supposed to," he said quietly. Ava and Noah exchanged a look. Long, doubtful, but also curious. The kind of look friends give each other when they know the argument's already lost. Noah sighed. Fine, but if I die, I'm haunting you. Ava groaned, but she followed. Marcus reached out and pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. The dust floated, the house creaked. His pulse filled his ears. Then, ding! The sound was small, but it sent goosebumps down all their arms. The brass doors shuddered and pulled apart, revealing a black mouth of velvet shadow. The air that spilled out was cooler than the attic, with a faint smell of old paper. Marcus stepped inside first. The floor was marble, veined gray and white, far too polished for a dusty attic. The walls were lined with ornate wood panels, carved with symbols he didn't recognize. Swirls, geometric shapes, something almost like faces. Ava hesitated, then followed him in. Noah lingered at the threshold, muttering curses under his breath before finally stomping inside. The doors whispered shut. There was no panel of buttons, only a single lever shaped like an old-fashioned switch. Above it, a circle of glass glowed faintly. Numbers rimmed its edge like on a clock face, but instead of hours, they were marked with a string of digits none of them could quite parse. The lever twitched. Slowly, it began to pull itself down. No, nope, Noah blurted, but the floor dropped under them before he could reach the doors. The elevator sank. Not quickly, like a normal lift, but slow and steady, as if descending through syrup. Their stomachs clenched all the same. Ava gripped Marcus's arm hard enough to hurt. It went down, and down, and down. The glowing circle above the lever ticked through its strange digits. Something about it felt alive. Then, with a final shudder, the elevator stopped. The doors slid open. At first, Marcus thought they had arrived in some kind of library. Rows upon rows of filing cabinets stretched into the dark, their handles glinting. The ceiling was lost in shadow, the floor tiled in checkerboard black and white. The air smelled strongly of paper and dust, dry and heavy. Whoa, Noah whispered. It's like an archive. Of what? Ava asked. Marcus stepped out. The floor was cold under his sneakers. His voice echoed faintly. Let's see. They moved cautiously between the cabinets. Each drawer had a neat label, last names written in looping cursive. Anderson, Bennett, Wilson, Carter, Ramirez, dozens, hundreds, stretching into infinity. Marcus froze when he saw his own last name, Anderson. His fingers trembled as he pulled the drawer open. Inside was a thick folder stamped with his name. He opened it and nearly dropped it. It was him. Birth certificate, medical records, a stack of report cards, a photo of him at 6 years old, missing his front teeth, notes about his soccer games, his allergies, even the time he broke his wrist falling off his bike. His whole life, cataloged. How is this even possible? Marcus whispered. Ava had opened a drawer labeled Wilson A. Inside was her handwriting from second grade, a poem she'd written about stars. Her school pictures lined up year by year, her braces, her first library card. Noah's drawer was the same, his handwriting, his favorite books, his comic drawings. All of them stared at one another, the weight of it pressing down. It's us, Ava breathed. Everything about us, our lives. They closed the drawers quickly, hearts racing. As they backed away, Marcus noticed something else at the far wall. Painted in thick black was a number. 1. Did you guys see that before? Marcus asked. Noah shook his head. What's it mean? They didn't know. But before they could puzzle it out, Marcus's sleeve brushed against an open drawer. The folder inside tumbled to the floor, pages spilling. Careful, Ava hissed, rushing to help. But one page tore in Marcus's hand. A clean diagonal rip across a school portrait of a boy they vaguely recognized from school. He wasn't anyone important, a sophomore. He had freckles and a crooked smile. The page fluttered to the floor, ripped in half. And the number on the wall changed. 2. The elevator behind them chimed softly, almost approvingly. Chapter 3. The missing. The boy was gone. They didn't realize it at first. Marcus, Ava, and Noah scrambled to collect the scattered pages, their hands shaking as they tried to fit the ripped photo back together like it could somehow undo the damage. The torn halves wouldn't stay. One corner crumpled beneath Noah's palm, the smiling face of the sophomore boy Freckles, frozen forever, stared up at them in silence. "This doesn't make sense," Ava whispered. "It's just paper?" Marcus swallowed, throat dry. His gaze flicked back to the wall. The number hadn't changed back. It was still there in thick black strokes. 2. Noah snorted nervously. Maybe it's like a counter. Maybe it's just keeping track of... I don't know how many accidents happen. It doesn't mean anything. But he didn't sound convinced. They shoved the folder back into the drawer and pushed it shut with a little more force than necessary. The clang echoed down the endless rows of cabinets. For a long moment, no one moved. "Let's go," Ava said. No one argued. They hurried back to the elevator and Marcus yanked the lever up. The ride was silent except for the sound of their own breathing. The glowing dial ticked upward through its strange digits until the brass doors finally opened again, spilling them back into the dusty attic. It was still morning. The sun cut across the slanted beams, making the cobwebs glow faintly. It was as if nothing had happened, except Marcus's hands still shook, and Ava's face was pale, and Noah's shirt was damp with sweat. "Promise me," Ava said suddenly. Her voice cracked like she'd been holding it back too long. "Promise me we won't go back down there again." Marcus wanted to agree. The words were right there, heavy on his tongue. But something in his chest resisted. That number, that wall, the smell of paper, the weight of those cabinets. He needed to understand. Before he could answer, a shriek echoed from outside. They bolted to the window. A knot of students gathered on the sidewalk across from the house, pointing and murmuring. Marcus recognized some of them from school. Football players, a girl from band, a couple of kids who hung out behind the gym. At the center of the group was Mrs. Wilcox, the landlord, clutching her apron and shaking her head. "What's going on?" Noah muttered. Ava pushed the window higher. Voices drifted up. "They can't find him. His mom called the school this morning. He was just here yesterday." Marcus felt ice bloom in his stomach. "No." Ava turned to him sharply. "What?" He swallowed hard. "The boy, the one in the picture." "What are you talking about?" Noah demanded. "That sophomore kid, his folder, the one I ripped." Ava's eyes widened. "No, Marcus, don't." But the whispers below carried up like proof. Missing posters being planned. A name repeated. A description that matched the freckled boy in the photo. Gone, vanished overnight. The three of them backed away from the window like it had burned them. "Okay," Noah said, his voice too loud, too fast. "Okay, so what? Coincidence. It's gotta be. People go missing all the time. Maybe he ran away. Maybe..." "Stop," Ava snapped. Her hands trembled against her sides. "Don't you get it? It's real. That place is real. Those files, they're not just paper, they're people, and if you mess with them, they disappear," Marcus finished quietly. The word hung heavy between them. For a long moment, no one spoke. The creak of the old house seemed to swallow their silence. Then Noah laughed, too harsh, too shaky. Nope, I'm not doing this. I'm not getting dragged into some supernatural death trap. I say we forget it. Forget we ever saw it. Never talk about it again." He grabbed his backpack and stomped toward the stairs, but Marcus noticed the way his shoulders hunched, the way he didn't look back, like if he glanced over his shoulder, the elevator might be watching. Ava turned to Marcus. Her eyes glistened. "She's right, we can't go back. Please, promise me." But Marcus couldn't, not yet. The number 2 burned in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking about what 1 had meant. How long had it been there? How many files had already been lost? And what if the number changed again without them even touching anything? "Marcus," Ava whispered, "please." He forced himself to nod, though it felt hollow. They left the attic, shutting the warped door tight. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He tossed under his sheets, the freckled boy's torn picture hovering behind his eyelids. He kept seeing the number on the wall ticking upward, 1 digit at a time, while faceless names dissolved into nothing. At some point, he padded barefoot to his desk and pulled open his journal. He didn't usually write much, mostly doodles, half-finished thoughts, but tonight his pen scratched furiously across the page. "What is the number? Who started it? How do we stop it?" His hand shook as he wrote the last question, because somewhere deep down, a part of him already suspected there was no stopping it, not yet. Only understanding. The next morning at school, whispers spread faster than wildfire. The missing boy's name was everywhere. Teachers murmuring in the hall, kids huddled by lockers. His desk sat empty, his books untouched. Some people swore they'd seen him yesterday. Others claimed he hadn't shown up in weeks. The stories didn't match. When Marcus, Ava, and Noah crossed paths between classes, none of them spoke of it, but their eyes told the truth. They all knew. By lunch, Marcus was ready to burst. He found Ava at their usual table, poking half-heartedly at her sandwich. "We have to figure it out," he said in a low voice. She looked up sharply. "No?" "We do. What if more people disappear?" Her lips tightened. "We promised." "You promised," he said, softer than he meant to. Ava's jaw trembled. Across the cafeteria, Noah slouched with his tray, pretending not to notice them. But Marcus caught the flicker of his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He was scared too. And Marcus knew then they couldn't just ignore it. The elevator wasn't done with them. That night, Marcus dreamed of the archive. He dreamed of drawers slamming open on their own, files spilling like blood, pages tearing themselves in the air. Every rip was a scream. Every crumple, a silence. The number on the wall ticked upward with every sound. 3, 4, 5, until it filled the walls, the ceiling, the floor. Numbers everywhere. A counter of loss. And at the very center stood a single folder older than the rest. Its label read only, unknown. When he woke, sweat slicked his sheets, and the dawn light felt colder than winter. Chapter 4. Files of Everyone. The elevator shouldn't have been waiting for them. And yet, when Lena pushed open the attic door 3 days later, there it was. Brass doors gleaming faintly in the half-dark, as if they'd never left. Marcus stepped in first, heart thundering in his chest. Ava lingered in the doorway, chewing her lip. "I can't believe we're back here," she whispered. "You didn't have to come," Marcus said, not unkindly. "Like I was going to let you two idiots go without me," she muttered, glancing at Noah. Noah shrugged, a nervous smile tugging at his lips. "I figured maybe it was all a dream. We prove it wasn't, and then we never have to think about it again." But even he didn't believe his own words. The air was stale in the attic, the smell of old dust and plaster heavy around them. When Marcus reached for the call button, his finger trembled. The little circle of brass was still there, faint and almost hidden. And beneath the familiar grid of numbers, the phantom button pulsed like a heartbeat. He pressed it. The elevator shuddered. The descent was longer this time. The floor numbers flickered past, 5, 4, 3, and then blankness. No more numbers, only silence and the low hum of machinery. When the doors finally parted, the archive waited for them. Rows upon rows of filing cabinets stretched into the distance, too many to count, vanishing into the dimness. Light bulbs buzzed faintly overhead, though some flickered as if caught in a perpetual storm. The smell hit them at once. Paper, ink, mildew. It was bigger than Marcus remembered. Or maybe it was shifting, alive, reshaping itself to welcome them back. No one spoke at first. They stepped out cautiously, their sneakers squeaking faintly on the tiled floor. Marcus trailed his hand along the nearest cabinet, his fingers brushing cool metal. The labels on the drawers were stamped neatly, alphabetical. He stopped at a drawer marked Anderson, Marcus. He froze. Ava peered over his shoulder. "Don't you dare open it." But he couldn't resist. Slowly, he pulled the drawer open. Inside, file folders stacked neatly, each one labeled with his name. The first was thin, containing hospital records from his birth, the name of the doctor who delivered him, his first cries typed neatly on a page. Another file contained his kindergarten teacher's report cards, his messy crayon drawings taped carefully inside. He flipped further, middle school, his first detention, his best science project. A list of every book he'd checked out of the library. Every moment of his life cataloged and preserved. "This is impossible," he murmured. Noah opened the drawer next to it. Wilson, Ava. He hesitated, then closed it quickly without peeking inside. Nope, not happening. But Ava's hand lingered. She looked pale. Don't, Marcus warned. I just want to see, she whispered, pulling out a single thin folder. She opened it and gasped. A slip of paper detailed her exact words during last year's fight with her brother. The phrasing, the tone, even the tear marks smudged across the ink. Her hand shook as she stuffed the folder back. I don't want to see anymore. Noah swallowed. His curiosity burned, but fear held him back. Instead, he turned to a random cabinet, Thompson Claire, a girl from their English class. He tugged the drawer open and froze. There she was, in pages of handwriting and typed transcripts. Her birth, her broken arm in second grade, her secret crush last spring. Every life, every secret, every mistake, boxed up in drawers. The three of them stared at one another. This is too much power, Ava whispered. Marcus nodded, but part of him was awed. It's like the world is written here, everything. Or rewritten, Noah said darkly. The word hung heavy. Marcus closed the drawer with a snap. We can't touch anything. We can't even breathe on it. We already saw what happens. Ava's eyes darted to the far wall. The number glowed there still, 2. Her stomach turned. What if it goes up again? Noah shivered. What if it goes down? They didn't want to think about that. For a while, they wandered cautiously through the aisles, keeping their hands to themselves. The cabinets stretched endlessly, some drawers pristine, others rusted with age. In the far distance, the bulbs dimmed until only darkness waited. Sometimes Marcus thought he heard whispers from those shadows, the sound of paper rustling when no one moved. And once, as he glanced back, he could have sworn one drawer slowly slid open by itself, a pale slip of paper peeking out like a tongue. He didn't tell the others. At last, they returned to the elevator. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe. The place clung to them, reluctant to let them go. The doors closed with a clang. As the elevator rose, Ava kept her eyes on the wall, but the number didn't change. It stayed steady. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't left anything behind, that the archive had marked them, claimed them. When they spilled back into the attic, she drew a shaky breath of relief. But Marcus lingered. He looked back at the empty space where the brass doors had been. Already the faint outline was fading. Soon it would vanish again, invisible to anyone else. And he realized something chilling. The archive hadn't just shown them what was hidden. It had chosen them. That night, Marcus lay awake again, staring at the ceiling. The images wouldn't leave him, drawers sliding open, secrets waiting. Every life written down in paper and ink. The sheer possibility of it burned in his chest. What if someone used it on purpose? What if someone already had? And what if the number on the wall wasn't counting what they had done, but what had been happening for years? His thoughts spun in the dark, restless and sharp, and beneath it all, one truth whispered louder than anything else. They would go back. The archive would make sure of it. Chapter 5, The Accident. The first mistake wasn't even dramatic. It didn't happen with lightning flashing or the cabinets shaking themselves open. It was smaller than that, an accident born of clumsy fingers and nerves stretched too thin. They hadn't meant to go back so soon, after all, they'd promised. But promises don't weigh much against curiosity or fear. 3 days after their last descent, Marcus found himself waiting at the bottom of Lena's driveway, hands shoved deep into his hoodie. Ava and Noah joined him, neither meeting his eyes. No one said we're going back, but the thought pulsed in all of them, unspoken and undeniable. By the time they climbed the attic stairs, their excuses were already lined up. Just one more look, just to make sure nothing's changed. Just so we don't lie awake wondering what's happening down there. The elevator waited, brass doors gleaming faintly in the dust. They pressed the phantom button. The ride felt longer this time. The hum of machinery seemed deeper, like a growl rising from the earth. When the doors slid open, the air hit them thick and heavy. The archive was darker than before. Fewer bulbs flickered. The cabinets seemed taller, their shadows stretching impossibly far. Ava shivered. It looks worse. Marcus swallowed. Let's just check a drawer, then leave. They drifted down one aisle, sneakers squeaking faintly. Noah was the first to stop. He yanked a drawer open without thinking, like he had to prove he wasn't scared. The label read, Holloway Brent. Marcus's stomach dropped. He knew that name. Brent Holloway was a senior at school, 2 lockers down from him, famous for tormenting the younger kids. Brent had tripped Marcus in the cafeteria last month, spilling his tray. He'd laughed until his friends cried. Don't, Ava whispered. Noah grinned nervously. Come on, what's the harm in just looking? He tugged the file out. It was thick, stuffed with pages. Too many. He flipped one open, an old report card. Brent scrawled handwriting across the margins. Another page held disciplinary slips, teacher complaints. Another detailed his first football game. Wow, Noah muttered. This guy really is a jerk. Marcus leaned closer despite himself. And then it happened. Noah tried to shove the fat folder back into the drawer, but the edges caught. Paper bent and tore. A long rip split down the margin of one page. The sound was louder than it should have been, sharp, echoing, like fabric tearing in a silent church. All 3 froze. The lights flickered violently. A gust of air swept through the cabinets, fluttering the pages. No, 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 Ava stammered. She reached out and tried to smooth the page, pressing the torn halves together. But the fibers wouldn't align. The rip gaped wider the harder she pushed. Marcus's chest tightened. Put it back now. Noah shoved the folder into the drawer. His hands shook. His grin was gone. They stood in silence, waiting. The archive held its breath. Then, faintly, on the far wall, the glowing number ticked upward. 3. Back in the attic, they didn't speak. Not on the way down the stairs, not as they spilled into the living room, not as they shoved on their shoes. It wasn't until the next morning, at school, that they realized what had happened. Marcus walked into the cafeteria, tray balanced carefully in his hands. He scanned the room automatically, eyes flicking to where Brent always sat with his crew near the vending machines. The table was full of football players, but not Brent. Marcus frowned. He carried his tray past, pretending not to look. He searched the gym hallway later. Brent's locker, once plastered with stickers and dented from years of slams, stood perfectly clean, no lock, no name. By third period, it was clear. Brent Holloway was gone. Not just absent, not just skipping class. Gone. No one mentioned him. Teachers never called his name during attendance. The football team had an empty spot no one seemed to notice. Even his friends didn't glance toward the cafeteria corner where he used to sit. It was like he'd never existed. Marcus's stomach twisted. He found Ava and Noah between classes, dragging them into a quiet stairwell. He's gone, Marcus hissed. Ava's face was pale. I know. Noah shoved his hands into his hoodie pocket, trying to look casual. His voice cracked. Maybe he moved, changed schools? Overnight, Marcus snapped. With no one noticing, with no one remembering, his locker's gone. His name's not even on the attendance sheets anymore. It's like he was erased, Ava whispered. Silence pressed around them. Don't say that, Noah muttered, but he couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. Marcus's mind raced. Brent had been awful, cruel, everyone knew it, a bully, and yet, was that enough to justify this? The thought chilled him. He saw the number glowing in his mind, 3. How many people had already vanished? That night, Marcus dreamt of Brent Holloway. But it wasn't Brent, not exactly. It was a paper version of him. Thin, pale, eyes blurred like smudged ink. His mouth opened and pages fluttered out like wings. Undo it, the figure whispered. The sound was dry, brittle, like leaves crumbling underfoot. Marcus woke with a strangled gasp, the echo of paper tearing still in his ears. At school the next day, Ava caught him at his locker. She didn't bother with a hello. We have to figure this out. Her tone was sharp, urgent. She glanced around to make sure no one was near. That number on the wall? It went up again because of us. Because of Brent. What if it's been going up for years? What if we're just the next ones caught in it? Marcus slammed his locker shut. Then we have to find out who started it. Noah appeared at the end of the hall, dragging his feet. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes shadowed. "Don't," he said, voice low. "Don't go back again. We made a mistake. Let it be." But Marcus shook his head. "We can't, not with this hanging over us. What if more people disappear? What if it's us next?" Ava cut in softly. The words silenced them. The bell rang, students swept past, filling the hallway with chatter and laughter, the ordinary world moving on, oblivious to the truth hidden under their feet. Marcus clenched his fists. He felt the weight of Brent's absence like a stone in his chest. This wasn't over. The elevator would call them back again. And when it did, they'd have to be ready. Chapter 6. The number. People forgot things all the time. Keys, birthdays, the punchline to a joke you'd been saving for months. The city was built on small disappearances. That's what made Marcus's stomach tighten, because this was not a small disappearance. This was the kind of absence that left a hollow place at a table where shoulders used to slump, the kind you could point at and say, "Something's missing," and the world would refuse to believe you. When Marcus first noticed Brent's absence in the cafeteria, he'd chalked it up to chance. Senior prank, a family emergency, a haircut that made him want to hide from the world. But as noon slid into second period and no teacher called Brent's name, no one looked for him, no one whispered his name into the hallways, an odd, heavy silence gathered in Marcus's chest. He texted Lena first. Her reply came fast. "Where are you?" He found her in the library, bent over a stack of textbooks like she could read the fear away. Her pencil hovered above a blank page, but she didn't write. When he slid into the seat opposite her, she looked up and the look on her face wiped everything out of his head. Panic, quick and bright, an animal. "You saw?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Her voice came out thin. "I went by his locker during third. The plaque. There's no plaque. There's nothing. It's like it was never there." Ava was waiting for them in a study cubicle, hands wrapped around a thermos like it might keep her steady. She looked like she'd been crying. The rim of her eyes was red. When Marcus sat down, she gave him the smallest, strangest smile that meant, "We are all right except for the part that is not." They did what they always did, huddled in the smallest possible circle and tried to make their world make sense. "You saw the file, Marcus," Lena said bluntly. She'd always been the one to cut through the fog. "You saw the photo tear." Marcus felt the old impulse to shrug, to make it a joke. "It was a stupid accident," he said. "Noah!" He stopped. He kept meaning to stop saying Noah's name. It sounded like admitting another person existed in the same room as he did now. It was totally an accident. Ava's fingers tightened on the thermos. "Accident or not, he's gone. Marcus, someone's gone. A person." "It's one person," Marcus managed. "One out of, what, thousands? We're probably overreacting." Lena's mouth was a thin line. "You say that now because you want to breathe." She leaned forward. "When I looked at that wall, before when we were there, the number changed. It went up. It was 3. We saw it. We touched a page. That number moved." Marcus could feel the char of that moment again. The metallic sound of the drawer, the way the lamp hummed like something pleased. The number on the far wall had glowed up to 3 in the archive, and there had been a quiet, almost bureaucratic finality about that glow, as if something had been processed and ticked from the ledger. "What does it mean?" Ava whispered. They all looked at each other, as if between the 3 of them, the answer might coalesce like light on the water. It didn't. They agreed, awkwardly and under duress, to meet at Lena's after school. The 3 of them walked the long, familiar route through city streets that no longer felt familiar. The banal things that used to comfort, coffee shops, a dog walker's command, the bakery's window full of braided loaves, now read like the set dressing on the wrong kind of film. The world continued to hum, buses coughed, a woman argued on her phone, a man in a suit ate a sandwich on a stoop. Nothing slowed for the size of their fear. They tried to speak of anything else. They attempted jokes that fell flat. Marcus kept forcing a laugh and felt it scrape at the inside of his throat. Lena tried to make lists. Practical things. Ava made coffee and handed it out like it was a first aid kit. "Okay," Lena said at last, in that voice that cut through the chatter. "First, breathe. Second, We do not, under any circumstances, go back down there and touch anything. They all said it out loud like it would hold them, promising in the only way they knew, by naming a rule and making it stick to the air with breath. On paper, that promise was simple. The problem with promises is not their words, but how thin the paper they're written on feels once the thing that made them necessary thrums against your ribs. Marcus wanted to tear that paper and throw it away and never look at the pile again. Then he wanted to crawl back into the archive and pull every single drawer open and see what would happen if he messed with something different. If he scraped a signature from a page, blurred out a name, rearranged a life like a scavenged jigsaw. He didn't say any of that. Instead, he told jokes. He made the worst, flattest puns he'd heard in weeks, because if his voice could make Lena and Ava laugh, if he could make them tilt their heads and say, "Ugh," and then move on, then maybe some of the world's edges would snap back into place. Marcus was good at jokes. He had used them to slide out of trouble before. They were a buffer between him and the thing he felt might swallow him whole. "This is ridiculous," Lena said finally after another of his feeble attempts at levity. She was anything but calm. Her hands were doing that anxious fiddling they always did when her thoughts were falling down a rabbit hole. I'll fix it. We need information." "Do we?" Marcus said, a little too bright. "Because I can Google, cases of missing football players, and be done." He tried to make his voice light. Ava gave him the smallest, actually amused half-smile. It felt like a small, miraculous reprieve. But Lena wasn't mollified. "No, not Google, old records, building permits, newspaper archives, anything that tells us if this has happened before." "Sounds like a deep dive," Ava said, and the joke slipped by the jagged edge of the moment. Her hands shook when she laughed. She wasn't ready to stop telling the truth. They left the library under an ordinary sky and split up with ordinary plans. Lena would talk to her mother about who had access to old building records. Ava would check with the town library's microfiche. Marcus would try to cajole someone in the football crowd into admitting whether Brent had family who might have taken him away. They promised to text every hour. "Ass here." Only Marcus stayed in bed that night until the sunlight had slipped into something flatter and angrier. He left his phone face down on his pillow like it might explode. Brent's face had become a smear in his head. No longer a kid he jostled in the hallway, but a hole shaped like a person. He thought about the number, how clean and automatic it had looked when it had clicked from 2 to 3. It was a cold thing, not angry, not vengeful, just a machine noting. Marcus realized he'd always imagined supernatural things like storms or witches, messy and full of noise. This was quiet. This was the quiet of an accountant closing a ledger at the end of the month and moving on with his life. Yep. The next day at school, the rumor mill sputtered and died and then sputtered again with new shapes. Someone said Brent's mom had called into work and said he'd been picked up by a cousin out of state. Someone else said he was at home, sick. But no one could point to a fact with a straight face. Marcus kept checking the attendance roster like he might find a hole or a smear where Brent's name should be. There was nothing. He and Lena met near the band room at lunch, a corner away from the eye line of their classmates. They traded information in small bits. "You asked Mrs. Wilcox," Marcus said. "She says there's no record, nothing. She's weird about even talking about the old building," Lena said. She stared at the peeling paint on the band room door as if it might provide an answer. She said the building had some remodeling in the 70s, but the records were gone or never filed. She laughed like she didn't want to talk about it. It was like someone told a joke and then pretended it wasn't funny. Ava joined them, cheeks still blotchy. "The microfiche at the library. Lena, they have an article, but it's tiny. A paragraph. Some kid fell from the scaffolding when the building was under construction. Name wasn't printed clearly. One of those things that get a little mention and then never again." 15 years old, Marcus said when Ava read the line to them. His voice was flat. "That's," Lena started, then stopped. The number in her throat rose in a small, sick lump. "That's the same age as us, 15. They sat with that like a third person at the table. It didn't move. It didn't sit politely and make a fuss. It just existed and their bones grew heavier for it. Do you think, Ava said, that whatever is down there, whatever started, maybe it started with that kid? They all looked up at the ceiling as if it might drop the answer into their laps. Marcus felt, with a sick, private certainty, that it might be true. How else could a thing like the archive begin except by a single act? The damage of a file, the ripping of a name, a life turned to dust because of a small cruelty or a terrible accident? You know, Marcus said finally, the bitterness sharp. There's something worse than actually doing something bad. There's the illusion that it will make things better. What do you mean? Lena asked. He thought of Brent and the cafeteria laughter, the way it had felt to be shoved and laughed at, small indignities turning into a slow bruise. He thought of the early, tempting idea. What if you could press a thumb down on a page and make somebody's mean voice go away? The thought had come like a hot itch, then settled like a fever. I mean this, he said. You can imagine erasing someone. You can imagine pressing a thumb on a name and it goes away. And for a second, you feel lighter. But then you think about what that actually is. It's a blank spot. Someone's empty chair. Someone's erased birthday. And the world doesn't even blink. Ava's face crumpled. That's exactly it, she whispered. It's not clean. Lena reached across the table and put her hand over Marcus's. Her fingers were cool, steady. We promised, she said, and the promise sounded both younger and truer than it had that first night. We keep it, we walk away, we do sensible things like research and get help. We don't play God with paper. Marcus wanted to laugh in relief. Instead, he swallowed. The promise seemed thicker now. It had caught edges of metal and grit and something that felt like conscience. They made lists, silly adolescent lists of practical things that were meant to give them leverage. Who to ask, what to look up, whose library card still worked. Planning felt like armor. It wasn't very good armor. That evening, Lena's mother typed old emails into a search bar and came up with more questions than answers. Ava found a copy of a building permit from the distant past with a smudge signature and a faint, unreadable stamped date. Marcus, who had no mother to help him search archives, tried to get a hold of an uncle who worked at the city records office and got only a voicemail that said the office would be closed for the afternoon. It was as if the city itself were a little too busy to pull a name out of a file. They met less and less in the days that followed. The promise to avoid the archive was being kept the only way they could. By skirting the thing that called to them, Marcus found that avoidance itself made him more talkative, because silence left him with too much of the archive smell in his head. He joked at school like a man who'd lost his map and decided to be charming while he waited for the impossible to happen. On the third day, Lena woke with a dream that felt like warning. In it, she walked through the archive and the drawers opened like mouths. Numbers scrolled on the far wall, one after another, in a long, indifferent list. Each digit was a person. For a moment, she thought of everyone she knew and tried to reconcile them with the numbers. She woke up crying in the dark. Ava came over after school, and they sat on Lena's kitchen floor and folded paper cranes like a ritual. They spoke softly, nothing heavy. Folding was a thing to do with hands so the heart could have a chance to rest. Marcus arrived late, laughing at a joke he'd half made on the way over. The laughter fell away when he saw them both, solemn in the strange domestic circle. He swallowed the words he'd been about to say, an attempt at levity that would have sounded tinny, and sat down heavily. We made a rule, Lena said simply. We keep the rule. Marcus nodded, and for once his smile felt small and a little honest. Rule observed. They sat in the pressing, ordinary night. The refrigerator's hum, the clock in the living room, Lena's cat winding around their ankles. And for a little while, the world seemed to stay its appetite. Promises held just enough to let them breathe. They agreed to call each other at once if anything strange happened. They agreed not to tell adults who wouldn't believe them and might break things with practical actions that would make matters stranger. We have to fix it ourselves, Lena said once, in that voice again that meant she would not be stopped by the usual lines or polite fear. Marcus always trusted that voice, foolishly or wisely. It made trouble into a map. That night, Marcus sat at his desk and stared at the darkness by his window. The street lamp outside made a soft pool below. Somewhere, a car door slammed, a sound that seemed unsubstantial. He wondered how many digits the number might have once it stopped counting small things. How big a ledger could get before it consumed the margin. He imagined the far wall with a cascade of numbers, 3, 4, 5, marching on like a line of solemn soldiers. Then he imagined it resetting as if an account were balanced at last. Their vow was clean and bright in the small room. They had made a promise and wrapped it around themselves like a coat. It kept out some of the cold, but not all. Marcus slept poorly, as if a ledger had been opened and some clerk had his name on the list under the heading, Possible. And the archive, somewhere under the building, waited like a receptionist who knew every name before it was spoken. The number on its wall had moved. They had seen that motion and come back with hands that trembled. They did not touch the files again. They kept to their promise. But promises are not armor, Marcus would learn. Promises are paper, and paper rips. The number was patient. At the end of the week, they met again under the warm, dumb light of the diner on the corner. Marcus kept his jokes, but they were smaller now, less brash. Ava doodled patterns on her napkin, bored of being brave. Lena pushed her milkshake around and said little, thinking. Outside the window, someone placed a flyer on a lamppost. Missing, have you seen this boy? And it hung there with a curling edge and black and white photo. Marcus looked at it and felt his stomach clench because the face in the flyer seemed both familiar and impossibly wrong. It was the face he'd only ever seen in a folder on a cold, humming floor. No one at the diner spoke of the flyer. They ate and watched and tried to do nothing. As they left, the bell on the jukebox clanged and the night swallowed them. Lena put her hand on Marcus's shoulder the way she always did when she wanted to both comfort and direct. "We keep our promise," she said again. "We do," Marcus answered and meant it. At home that night, he lay on his back and watched the beam of light from his street lamp move across the ceiling. He tried to imagine the number on the far wall slowing, then stopping. He pictured a small, elderly man nowhere in particular, someone who had kept ledgers and never smiled, finally closing the book. Sleep came at last, but not gentle. Marcus dreamed of pages that ticked like clocks. In the dream, numbers rose and fell, and every time a page was turned, he felt a small, private loss. He woke with morning at the window and the taste of metal in his mouth. Somewhere beneath the city's ordinary thunder, a number stood and waited. It had changed once since they'd been there. It would change again. The question, the only one that mattered, was whether they were the hand that would guide it or the ones who had finally shut the book. They had made the vow. They had promised. And promises are the kind of thing a person keeps until the world demands otherwise. Chapter 7. The History of the Floor. The thing about curiosities is that they kept to their own rhythm. Lena had thought that after the accident, after the number had moved and Brent had disappeared and the three of them had sworn the vow again and again, that curiosity might take a holiday, that she might stop looking at corners and shadows like hands under a table. But curiosity is a long, thin animal. It nibbles at the seam of conscience until the seam comes loose and the thing you thought closed slides open. They spread their research like maps over Lena's kitchen table. Her mother's kettle clicked and breathed in the background. The three of them worked in a concert of small noises. Fingers tapping a phone, the whisper of a page being turned, the soft sigh of someone who wanted to sleep but couldn't. Lena's mother had been oddly helpful, more annoyed than surprised, which made Lena feel as if something adult and pragmatic had already smelled the same smoke and chosen to look away. Mrs. Morales returned from her office with a manila envelope from the building's old tenant files. Someone at the front desk had found it in a drawer and handed it off when she mentioned the strange elevator out of nowhere. Lena had told her nothing. Curiosity in adults wore the uniform of patience. The envelope contained yellowed paper, copies of architectural drawings, a brittle ledger, a single solidered photograph of the building when scaffolding still laced its ribs. The elevator on the photograph looked like a hole in the air, a dark rectangle in the attic, but the caption on the photograph was as dry and banal as anything printed in the town's municipal archive. Attic installation, date unknown. Contractor, undocumented. Undocumented, like a word scraped from memory. Ava had spent the morning at the town library, hands dusted with microfiche powder, the little machine's light blinking like a patient eye. She'd muttered to the librarian, soft questions, little polite urgings, and the librarian had sighed and gone to a locked box, returning with a single photocopy and an apology in her mouth. The photocopy was a quarter-column clipping from a 1975 issue. The headline, short and sterile, the language careful and cruelly sparse. "Boy missing from construction site," the clipping said. The paper printed a name, but the ink had eaten itself. Someone, time, water, poor storage, had made the name smear into a gray smudge where letters might have been. The boy's age was clear as a bell, 15. The article said he had been last seen near the attic scaffolding and that work halted for a day while police searched. It said that the name of the company was a small local contractor. It listed no arrests. The last line of the piece, a neighbor's quote, was the part that made Ava's fingers go numb. "We thought he ran," the neighbor said. "Boys run sometimes. They grow up and go." The sentence read as both explanation and erasure. Marcus had trawled the building itself. He'd talked to the security guard who'd been on duty for 30 years, a man with a face like weathered oak and an eye for the times when kids didn't belong. Mr. Hargreaves had been useful in a way that left Marcus uneasy. He remembered the 1985 remodeling. He remembered the odd evening when maintenance men appeared and bolted something down in the attic, and he remembered, with the kind of detail that lives on in the enjoyment of telling a story, that there had been an argument. Names, he said, had a way of losing their meaning when men in overalls walked through a building. "You ask quite a lot," Mr. Hargreaves told him at one point. "Kids in questions are like mice in the walls. You find them when you tear the plasters off. Sometimes the plasters were put up to keep the draft out. Sometimes they were put up to keep things in." Lena read the ledger over and over. The ledger was a thing of numbers and neat accounting. Owners and tenants marked in sharp script, dates and adjustments, a penciled margin where someone had once sketched a small star. In the ledger, the elevator belonged to a blank. There was a line that said mechanical added attic, and a date scrawled next to it, 1976. And then, below the neat tally, a name crossed out entirely. It was as if a pen, suddenly ashamed, had scraped its ink away. Someone had tried to undo a record. They fit the pieces together like bodies in a photograph. The boy, a 15-year-old missing in 1975. An attic elevator note in 1976 with no contractor on the books. Remodeling blips in 1985, 1995, 2005, 2015. Years that had been small, quiet, routine, and yet they found behind each one a whisper. A maintenance complaint, a worker who didn't return a call, a ledger scratched. In the microfiche Ava pulled up, there were short, almost ceremonial notices. Man missing, believed to have left. Worker injured, no foul play suspected. Employee unaccounted for. What struck them most was the cadence. Nearly every 10 years, a note would appear. Sometimes the note was pedestrian. Sometimes it was a story of disappearance. The rhythm was oddly regular, a metronome for vanishings. 10 years, Lena said out loud. The sound of the numbers in her mouth felt like naming a weather front. 1975, 1985, 1995, 2005, 2015. She ran her finger over the ledger, over the penciled star, over the one name that had been smeared out in the newspaper clipping. Everything we've looked at clusters around those marks. Ava's face had gone white. It's like a tide. It comes in every decade and takes something. Marcus stared at the ledger until his vision blurred. Some of the names the ledger mentioned weren't famous or startling. Clerks, night janitors, a man who delivered typewriters. But the pattern made a kind of arithmetic cruelty. If something in the building woke every decade and took breath, it also seemed connected to money and paperwork. The archive in the attic was full of paper. The holes in the ledger were made by ink and time and perhaps by something that didn't like being written down. They went to Mrs. Wilcox next, because if anyone might remember the vague rumor of a boy chased into the attic, they would. The landlord, who'd always had the shortest temper and the longest memory in the neighborhood, let them sit at her kitchen table as if the question was a polite ache she'd rather not attend. She set down a pot of tea and watched them with the shrewd, accusatory curiosity of someone who measures the world in the cost of things. "You kids look terrible," she said finally. "Why are you asking about the past? It's past for a reason." Lena held her ground. "We know there were disappearances. We think something started when the building was built. We found a clipping." Mrs. Wilcox's face went thin. For a second, there was a human fracture in the wax of her calm. A clipping, she echoed. You youth always find things in the dark and think you've discovered a city. She set her teaspoon down so hard the saucer chimed. This building was a hospital once, she said, the detail falling as if she'd been asked to remember a brand name. Then a workers' cooperative, then offices. They dug and dug. Things happen on building sites. Kids fall, men fall. People get swallowed up by their own lives. She folded her hands. That boy, if it happened, was a tragedy. But there are bigger tragedies than a missed name in the paper. A blankness lived in her voice then, the kind of blankness people erect like fences. They pressed. Lena asked about records. Marcus asked about contractors. Ava did not speak. She had a way of looking at older people like she might see the past in their hands, and Mrs. Wilcox's hands had the neatness of someone who had swept dust their whole life and learned to darken nothing she didn't have to. The landlord smiled politely and said, I was a young woman then. I don't remember details. I remember a hole in the roof and men with cords. That's all. They left with a small, heavy resentment for the adult capacity to blacken and then close a page. The library yielded more. There were building permits with careful embossed seals. One page read like a sentence written by someone trying to avoid admission. Interior modifications, attic mechanical installation. The signature line was a blot, some official's name scratched out after the fact. A 1985 memo from a contractor mentioned unexpected voids discovered, then apologized for administrative errors. A 1995 police blotter mentioned temporary absence, no evidence of foul play. The language of the city was a series of polite evasions. It was as if someone in authority had learned to use the economy of phrases to hide the fact of holes. Then Marcus found the small folder in the municipal stacks no one touched. It was misfiled under miscellaneous. Inside it were typed memoranda from 10-year intervals, terse emails from building supervisors, notes from insurance adjusters, anonymized police reports. The handwriting on one note, slanted and careful, was from a man calling himself site foreman. He wrote, records for attic are messy. We recommend sealing access. There are pages missing from the ledger. We recommend a mechanical installation to secure area. The date, 1976. The note was short and alarmed. It said something like, consider closure of shaft. In the margin of the memo, someone had scrawled a single number, 1. Ava pointed at that margin until her nail whitened. Is that a count? She asked. Lena's voice folded tight. It's what we saw on the wall. It's the same arithmetic. Someone was counting. They took photocopies. They made lists. They sat beneath the kitchen light until the ring of it went dull. The evidence stacked into a shape that was ugly and almost believable. Something had started with a boy in 1975. Something bureaucratic had tried to paper over it. And every decade, a small note, a hole in the ledger, a shrinking of a human being, had reappeared. At some point in the hermetic hours, Marcus said the thing they'd all thought but not spoken since Brent's face had slid into absence. The voice that came out of him was smaller than the thought had been. If it's been doing this for 50 years, he said, then that means it's been waiting. It comes like a machine on a clock. And if it waits on a clock, we could maybe anticipate it. Ava's fingers went cold. Or we could be in it when it comes back. Lena pressed her thumb into the corner of a paper until it crinkled. There's something else, she said. The attic elevator, the permit, is weird. It's like someone slipped a page into a book and then tried to erase the page. The paperwork doesn't add up. The contractor's name is blank. The ledger has been altered in ways that suggest someone didn't want an account to be clear. Whoever put that elevator in did it off the books later, after the boy's disappearance. So someone retrofitted it, Ava said. After something had already gone wrong here, why would someone install a device if they were trying to hide a problem? Marcus amused himself with a laugh that sounded too sharp. Maybe they didn't want the problem to go anywhere. Maybe they wanted to hold it. They slept poorly. The three of them lay awake thinking about the ledger and its pale star, the municipal memos, the way the building kept its quiet with the soft and steady persistence of a thing that bends facts into a useful shape. It felt like a conspiracy stitched out of small, legal threads. But that kind of conspiracy was the most insidious kind, bureaucracy as amnesia. By Wednesday, they had a plan of sorts. Not a heroic plan, but the kind of plan teenagers make when an adult solution seems impossible. Dig deeper, ask smaller, more irritating questions. Go to the people who had aged in the building and ask them to remember the sound of things. Marcus planned to speak to an old janitor from the 1970s who still came in sometimes at night to feed a co-worker's cat. Ava would spend an afternoon scanning the rest of the microfiche for names. Lena would press her mother for more files and call the city records office and, if nothing else, try to coax some official into saying the building's name out loud with the record in front of them. "You could tell your mother everything," Ava said. She did not mean it as a wedge to Virgin the secret. She meant it with the bluntness of someone who wanted support. "She works here. She might be able to dig things nobody else can." Lena hesitated. The thought sat like a pebble. "I don't know," she said. "There's a part of me that thinks if we tell adults it will get smoothed away. Worse, they'll write things down and make another kind of paper that forgets." It was one of the oldest arguments they'd had since the archive. Adults would not see the attic elevator. They would see only a hole to be fixed. Children could see things that were not tidy, maybe because the world had not yet learned to teach them what to ignore. Marcus threw down a crossword magazine over the table and stood up. He paced in a small, nervous circle like an animal checking its own tracks. "We have to be careful. We don't tell everyone, but we can't sit on this either. We find the boy's file. We find the first thing that was torn. That's where the story must start. If we can find the original damage, what started this, maybe we can close it." Ava's eyes were large and shining. "If the first file is the start," she said, "then whoever did the first tearing didn't know what they were doing. It might have been fear, bullying, an accident. The first act might be a small human wound." "And if we find it and fix it," Marcus said, "what if it just shudders and takes another thing? What if touching it again makes the number go up?" They were circling the thing the way you circle a wound. Careful, unable to touch it but needing to know. The archive belched a weird logic. Paper becomes being, a rip becomes absence. And the ledger, the microfiche clippings, the scratched-out permits were only the brittle fingers of evidence they could catch. When they left Lena's kitchen that evening, the street had folded into long, tidy shadows. The building across the way blinked office lights out floor by floor like someone closing eyes in a big, slow house. They walked home in a cluster, close enough that their shoulders brushed. No one said anything. The air had that sharpness of something between a storm and a sigh. Marcus said it finally, voice small. "Whatever this thing is, if it opens every 10 years, then it might open soon. If it's 2015, the next one would be 2025. He didn't need to say the year out loud for them to feel it. Ava's breath caught. Lena's face went still and fierce in a way Lena rarely allowed it to go. "Then we don't have much time," she said. "We find the first file, we find the attic record, we find the name in the smear." Outside, the city continued its ordinary aspect. A bus hissed its brakes. A couple argued quietly in the doorway of a laundromat. The world was enormous and untroubled. The ledger in the attic was small and very precise. The coincidence of scale didn't calm them. They agreed to split up, to gather more fragments the way ants collect crumbs before a storm. Marcus would see Mr. Hargreaves again and ask flat questions about men who remembered the night shift. Lena would press through the city records, demand signatures she hadn't been able to find. And perhaps, if her mother could coax anything useful, come back with a name that wasn't smeared. Ava would comb microfiche and run her fingers over every clip story that had been filed under miscellaneous. Before they parted, they stood on the sidewalk and looked back at the building. The windows threw down narrow ladders of light. In one of them, a late office worker twisted in his chair and lit a cigarette. It seemed almost absurdly that the building was doing nothing. Simply standing there, its skin of glass and stone doing what glass and stone always do. Under it, though, something like an old machine was waiting with its teeth bared politely, like spreadsheets ready to mark a name. "What if it's not just waiting for revenge?" Ava said at last. "What if it's waiting for someone who wants to be remembered?" The thought struck them with the sudden unpleasantness of a nettle. Lena's mouth went dry at the possibility. Perhaps some of the figures inside the archive were not simply vindictive, not monstrous and angry, but people with raw grief who had found the only way into a ledger was to tear it. You'll sleep if you can, Marcus said, trying to be light and failing. And if you can't sleep, don't be alone. They walked away with the small care of people who knew they had been stepped into something larger than themselves. The history of the floor lay folded like a sheet in a drawer. It had the weight of a thing that had been ignored enough that its edges had become brittle. If the elevator had been installed after the missing boy, if the ledger had been scratched and the contractor omitted, then whatever had begun had been hushed, then tidied, then left for the next set of hands to misread. In the attic, behind the closed doors, somebody, or something, kept counting. Chapter 8. A Voice in the Archive. The elevator groaned to life like it always did, a weary sigh as though resentful of being summoned again. Its fluorescent light flickered above the three of them, but Lena noticed how it seemed weaker now, like the elevator itself was tiring. Marcus leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, trying hard to mask the nervous bounce of his leg. Ava, clutching her notebook, looked pale but determined. No one spoke as the doors slid open. The phantom floor greeted them in silence. The air carried that same musty smell, like paper and rot, but stronger now, as if more files had decayed in their absence. Lena's stomach tightened when she saw the counter on the wall. 004. The number was etched into the metal plate above the filing cabinets. Last time, it had said 003. Another one's gone, Ava whispered. Her voice was small, as though the archive itself might be listening. They stepped inside. The sound of their shoes echoed across the cavernous room, rows upon rows of cabinets receding into shadow. It should have felt familiar by now. It didn't. Each time they came down here, the place seemed to shift in small, unsettling ways. The cabinets a little taller, the aisles a little longer, the shadows thicker. Tonight, though, something was different. A sound. At first, Lena thought it was the hum of the fluorescent lights, but no, this was lower, breathier. A voice, faint but rising out of the rows like it had been waiting. Help me. The three froze. Lena's hand went cold, her instinct screaming to back away, to get into the elevator and ride back up before the doors closed for good. But her feet didn't move. Help me. It came again, clearer this time, from somewhere deep in the cabinets. Marcus muttered, Nope, not doing this. But his words didn't match his body. He was rooted to the spot, eyes wide and searching. Ava clutched Lena's arm, whispering, We're not alone. The voice came once more, thin, desperate, with the scrape of sorrow behind it. Find me. Lena felt her pulse hammer in her ears. This wasn't just any voice. There was something about it, something young. The three exchanged glances. Marcus shook his head violently, but Ava was already pulling them forward. She moved quickly, like the longer they hesitated, the greater the chance the voice would vanish forever. They followed the sound down a narrow aisle lined with drawers that stretched to the ceiling. Dust drifted down as if stirred by their presence. The voice grew sharper with every step, threading between the cabinets like smoke. Please find me. Finally, they reached a cabinet near the back. The drawers here were rusted and dented as though someone had once tried to break them open. Lena reached out. Her hand shook as she gripped the cold metal handle. The drawer slid out with a groan. Inside was a single folder. It looked older than the rest, its paper yellowed, the edges curling with age. The tab had only one word written in faded ink. Elliot. A hush fell over them. None of them spoke, but the name seemed to thrum in the air, heavy with meaning. The voice whispered again, closer now, almost inside their heads. You found me. Ava gasped and stumbled back. Marcus cursed under his breath, but Lena couldn't move. Her eyes were locked on the folder. It felt alive. Not literally moving, but breathing. The paper seemed to pulse faintly, like a heartbeat echoing through the file. And then, faintly, the smell of smoke, like old wood singed long ago. Marcus broke the silence first, his voice rough. That's it. That's gotta be the first one. The file that started all this. Lena's throat went dry. She wanted to believe him, but deep down, she knew this wasn't going to be that easy. The voice lingered in the air, wrapping around them with a pleading insistence. Don't leave me here. Ava clutched her notebook to her chest, her knuckles white. It's him. The boy from 50 years ago. The one who… Shh. Marcus cut her off sharply. His eyes darted to the shadowed corners of the archive. Don't say it out loud. Don't give it power. Lena swallowed hard, but she couldn't shake the image of a boy, 15 maybe, hiding in the dusty corners of this building decades ago, his pain etched into these papers. His voice trapped in the walls of this phantom floor, waiting half a century for someone to listen. And now they had. The folder sat there, silent and terrible in its simplicity. One word. One life. Elliot. The voice returned, more urgent this time, rising up through the cabinets like a warning and a plea all at once. Don't let them find me. The lights above flickered and the air turned cold. For the first time since discovering the phantom floor, Lena wished they'd never stepped off the elevator. Chapter 9. The Boy's Story. The three of them stood in the dim hum of the archive, staring at the folder as if it might reach out and bite them. Elliot. The name scrawled across the yellowed tabs seemed to hum in the stale air, vibrating just beneath their skin. Lena's palms were damp and her throat had gone dry, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. Ava hugged her notebook like a shield. Marcus stood stiff, his jaw clenched, but his hands trembled against his arms. Lena broke the silence. We have to open it. No, Marcus shot back instantly. No way. Look at that thing. It's wrong. You feel it too. It's not like the others. Ava's voice was soft, cautious, but steady. That's why we have to. Everything points back to this. If we're ever going to understand the cycle, the disappearances, the number on the wall, we need to know who Elliot was. The fluorescent light above buzzed like a trapped insect. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, pressing in around them. Lena stepped forward, her fingers hovered above the folder. She hesitated only a moment before sliding it out. The paper inside crackled with age. The smell of smoke and mildew clung to it, thicker than before, as if the folder had soaked up decades of decay and sorrow. She laid it open on the top of the cabinet. At first glance, it looked like any of the other files. Birth certificate, school records, photos tucked into plastic sleeves. But everything about it felt wrong. The paper edges curled and frayed. Words bled faintly at the corners of the pages, as though the ink itself had tried to escape. And then came the whisper. Don't forget me, Ava gasped, stepping back. Marcus swore under his breath, but Lena leaned closer. The voice had come from the file, not the room, not the cabinets, but the folder itself. The first page was a school photograph, a boy with dark hair falling into his eyes, his face too serious for his age. He couldn't have been older than 15. The picture was grainy, the corners burned as if someone had held it too close to a flame. Lena's chest tightened. This was him, Elliot. She turned the page. School reports, average grades, attendance scattered with unexplained absences, notes in the margins from teachers. Withdrawn. Easily distracted. Doesn't participate. Another whisper, clearer now, threaded into her thoughts. They wouldn't leave me alone. The words slithered down her spine like cold water. Ava pointed at a page with shaking fingers. Look. Tucked into the file was a disciplinary report, not for Elliot, but involving him. A fight in the stairwell. Multiple students involved. Witness statements. Words jumped off the page, cornered, shoved, bruised. Attic storage room? Marcus muttered. Attic. That's where he… Ava trailed off. Her voice broke. The next page was stained. Lena couldn't tell if it was water or something darker. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic, scrawled across lined paper. They said I don't matter. They said no one would even notice if I disappeared. I tried to leave through the roof, but the door was locked. I can still hear them laughing. The words blurred in Lena's vision. She blinked hard, her throat aching. The whisper came again, stronger, a thread of pain twisting through it. They locked me in. They never came back. Ava's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus took a step back, shaking his head like he could physically shove the words out of his mind. Stop, he said harshly. We don't need to hear this. We don't need to… Yes, we do, Lena cut him off. Her voice cracked but held firm. We owe it to him. Her fingers turned the next page. It wasn't paper this time, it was a photograph. Black and white, a dim, dusty room with rafters overhead and broken boxes stacked high. The attic. A dark smudge in the corner, faint, almost too blurred to make out, but the shape of someone crouched, knees drawn to chest. Lena's breath hitched. And then the whisper became something more. They left me. They laughed while I begged. I scratched the walls until my nails broke. I waited for someone to come back. The words filled the archive, no longer faint but alive, echoing through the rows of cabinets. The voice of a boy, both present and impossibly far away. Marcus's face had gone pale, his bravado stripped away. This is messed up, this is so messed up. We shouldn't be here, we shouldn't. The counter on the wall clicked. 005. The sound was sharp, final, like a judge's gavel. All three of them whipped around to stare at it. No, Ava whispered. No, no, no. Who was it this time? Who? But before the panic could bloom, Elliot's voice cut through again, steadier now, stronger. You see me? You hear me? You know what they did? The pages of the file fluttered as if stirred by a breath. More documents spilled out. Medical records with notes about untreated injuries, letters unsent, a detention slip signed in jagged handwriting. And then, at the very bottom, a page so worn it looked ready to crumble. Lena reached for it with trembling fingers. The page bore only one sentence, scrawled in ink so heavy it tore the paper. If no one remembers me, I will make them remember. The air in the archive turned icy. The fluorescent light buzzed and dimmed, plunging the rows of cabinets into half shadow. Elliot's whisper had become a voice now, raw and insistent, reverberating off every surface. 50 years, waiting, watching, every 10 years they come back, and I show them what they did to me? Ava whimpered, her hand digging into Lena's arm. It's him. The cycle. He started it. He's been keeping this place alive. Marcus's voice shook. Alive? He's not alive, Ava. He's trapped, Lena said, the word heavy on her tongue. The folder in front of them pulsed faintly, as though beating with a heart that hadn't stopped in half a century. Don't leave me again. Lena looked at the file, at Elliot's blurred photograph, at the desperate scrawl of his words. She felt the weight of his pain pressing down on her shoulders, demanding something she wasn't sure she could give. This wasn't just about history, this wasn't just about curiosity. They had found the boy. And now, the boy wanted something from them. Chapter 10, The Temptation. The elevator doors closed with their familiar sigh, and for the first time none of them rushed to press the button. Lena leaned against the cool steel wall, her arms wrapped around herself. Ava sat cross-legged on the floor, her notebook unopened in her lap. Marcus paced in the small space, his sneakers squeaking with each turn. Nobody spoke until the number changed. 005. Lena's stomach dropped. Even up here, back in the ordinary hum of the elevator, the counter burned into her mind. Every visit meant another life erased, someone gone from the world above with no explanation. They didn't know who yet, not this time, but they would. They always did. It was Ava who finally broke the silence, her voice so soft Lena almost didn't hear it. Do you ever wonder? She trailed off as though afraid of the thought itself. Marcus snorted bitterly. Wonder what, if we've completely lost our minds? Yeah, pretty much every second. No, Ava shook her head. I mean, what if we could use it, on purpose? The word hung in the air like a curse. Lena stiffened. Ava's cheeks flushed and she shook her head quickly. I'm not saying I would, I'm just thinking. That's all, just thinking. Marcus stopped pacing, his face hardened, but Lena saw the flicker in his eyes. He'd thought it too. They all had. The files weren't just names on paper, they were lives. The evidence was undeniable. One smudge, one tear, one mistake, and someone was gone. Just gone. How easy would it be? A bully erased, a cruel teacher silenced. Someone who had hurt them, gone in an instant. The thought rooted itself in Lena's chest like a poisonous weed. She hated it, but she couldn't stop it from growing. Elliot's voice slithered into her mind, faint but unmistakable. They deserve it, don't they? They deserve to feel what I felt. Lena squeezed her eyes shut. The words weren't hers, but they were inside her all the same. Marcus dropped into the corner of the elevator, his hands raking through his hair. You know what would happen if people like Connor had their hands on this? Lena frowned. Connor? My cousin. His voice was sharp, bitter. The guy thinks breaking noses is a hobby. He'd burn through those files like confetti. Teachers, coaches, anyone who ever looked at him funny. You think the world's messed up now? Give Connor this room and see what happens. Ava's lips pressed thin. But we're not Connor. Marcus shot her a look. Ava? She hugged her knees, refusing to meet his eyes. I know it's dangerous, I know it's wrong, but… She swallowed hard. You didn't see what Mr. Halverson did to my brother last year, the way he made him feel so small. He almost dropped out of school because of him. Just one piece of paper. Her voice cracked and she bit her lip hard, forcing herself silent. The elevator creaked. Lena's pulse quickened. The temptation was real, heavier than the stale air pressing against them. Elliot's voice curled through the silence. They took everything from me, but you can take something back. You can make it fair. Lena shivered. The words seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Marcus muttered, Yeah, real fair. Just wipe people off the map and pretend it fixes things. That's not justice. That's… He broke off, his jaw tightening. Lena studied him. What were you going to say? He hesitated, his fists clenching. My dad's boss, Mr. Harper. Jerk's been grinding him down for years. Makes him stay late, makes him miss games, holidays, everything. I've watched my dad come home looking like he's got nothing left. You think I haven't thought about it? I have. I hate myself for it, but I have. The words hung heavy in the elevator, thicker than the buzzing light overhead. Lena pressed her back against the wall, the steel cool through her shirt. She wanted to say something, to pull them back from the edge, but the truth was clawing at her too. She thought of Sophie Leland, the girl who'd made her life miserable since 6th grade. The cutting remarks, the laughter, the way Sophie could turn a whole classroom against her with one well-placed whisper. One file, one smudge of ink. Lena's hands curled into fists. She hated herself for imagining it. Elliot's whisper came again, softer this time, almost tender. Don't let them do to you what they did to me. The elevator doors opened with a ding, startling all three of them, but the lobby was empty. The hum of the building went on as usual, computers buzzing, phones ringing. Normal life, oblivious to the shadow below. Ava stood quickly, her face pale. We can't go back tonight. Not now, not like this. Marcus agreed with a grunt, but his eyes darted toward the doors as if afraid they'd vanish without him. Lena stepped out last, her chest aching with unspoken words. They walked through the lobby together, but none of them spoke. The temptation hung between them, heavy and poisonous, like smoke that refused to clear. Even once Lena crawled into bed that night, the whispers followed her. Just one file, just one change. Wouldn't it feel good? She pressed her hands over her ears, but it didn't matter. The archive had crept inside her, and Elliot's voice wasn't going anywhere. Chapter 11. The Lost Souls. The archive changed again? It was subtle at first, a dimming of the amber lamps that had guided them through endless corridors, a silence that became heavier, stickier, pressing against their ears until every breath sounded like an intrusion. Lena kept close to Marcus and Ava, her pulse quickening as they descended a spiral staircase that seemed carved from the marrow of some enormous bone. The steps creaked, but there was no echo, no bounce of sound to assure them they were still anchored to reality. The deeper they went, the more it felt like the archive itself was exhaling around them. An endless sigh that bent the air, shaping it into something watchful. When they finally reached the bottom, the stairs spat them into a cavernous hall. Shelves no longer lined the walls in neat rows. Instead, they jutted out at odd angles, broken, twisted. Some toppled as if knocked aside by a furious hand. Pages drifted loose in the air, fluttering without wind. The light here came not from lamps, but from the books themselves. ghostly glimmers bleeding from torn spines and fractured bindings. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. This doesn't look like the other sections. Ava crossed her arms, though her shoulders trembled. That's because it isn't. This is where the system puts the ones it can't fix, the souls that fractured. The what? Lena asked, already knowing she wasn't going to like the answer. Every voice we've heard, Ava said, motioning toward the drifting pages. Every echo. They were fragments. Bits left behind when the archive couldn't contain them anymore. But some get stuck whole, not erased, not free, just lost. The last word hung like frost in the air. Lena's stomach dropped. So they're still here. Ava nodded. Trapped in the dark layers of memory, the place no one is supposed to walk. Marcus ran a hand over his face, as though dragging himself awake from a nightmare. And we're just walking straight into it. We don't have a choice, Ava said flatly. If Elliot's voice reached us, it means the cycle is breaking. But so long as these souls remain, the archive will keep feeding. It doesn't let go willingly. As if summoned by her words, the silence broke. It began with a whisper, not like Elliot's careful, aching voice, but dozens layered together, weaving and unraveling until they were impossible to tell apart. Lena froze, the sound making her bones vibrate. It wasn't words at first, just the sensation of being beckoned. She gripped her hands into fists, nails biting her palms, trying to anchor herself. Marcus muttered, "Please tell me you hear that too." "I hear it," Lena whispered. "God, I hear it." The voices multiplied. They poured from the cracks in the walls, rose from between the toppled shelves, seeped from the very floor beneath their feet. They were crying, pleading, murmuring names that didn't belong to them anymore. Lena swore she heard her own name once, soft, coaxing, as though the archive itself had memorized her heartbeat. Ava pressed her palms hard against her temples, wincing. "Don't listen. That's how they pull you under." "Pull you under?" Marcus demanded. But Lena already knew. She could feel it, threads of memory tugging at the edges of her consciousness, loosening thoughts she'd worked so hard to keep buried. Shame, fear, the moment in her life she had promised herself no one would ever see. It slipped forward like a fish flashing beneath dark water, and the archive seemed to smell it, to hunger for it. "No," Lena whispered harshly to herself. "Not again, not here." The room shifted with her refusal. Shelves groaned and splintered, and for the first time, Lena thought she saw them. Faces pressed between the books, eyes hollow, mouths stretched into voiceless screams. Souls sealed into spines, broken open and repurposed as warnings. Marcus stumbled back, nearly falling against a collapsed shelf. "What the hell? Don't look at them," Ava barked, snapping him back upright. "If you look too long, they see you. They'll follow you out." Lena forced herself to keep moving, though her legs quivered with each step. She wanted to help them. Every lost soul she passed seemed to reach for her, invisible hands grazing her skin like static. But she knew what Ava meant. This wasn't rescue. This was drowning. And then came the temptation. The archive shifted again, opening a path that split from the central hall. Its walls were smoother, cleaner, the oppressive whispers quieter there. At the end of it was a light, soft, golden, like the glow of her bedroom lamp when she was 10 years old, reading late at night. "Lena," a voice called from that hall, a single voice, steady, warm, her father's. Her knees nearly buckled. It couldn't be real. He was long gone, a memory carved deep and painful, but the sound of him, the exact cadence, the quiet way he said her name when he was proud of her, flooded her like a tide she couldn't hold back. "Lena, come home," the voice said again. Marcus's hand clamped around her arm. "Don't." His grip was desperate, almost bruising. "It's not him." Her throat constricted. "But it's not him," Marcus snapped, shaking her. "It's bait. That's what this place does." Ava stepped between them, her expression unreadable. "He's right. The archive uses the strongest threads it can find. It knows your wounds. If you step into that light, you won't come back." The golden glow pulsed, tempting, and for a moment Lena hated herself for wanting it, for wanting the impossible comfort of a voice that would never again exist in the real world. She tore her gaze away, trembling, her breath hitching painfully. Marcus's grip softened, but he didn't let go. His hand was an anchor. Without it, she wasn't sure she could have turned her back on that light. As they moved forward, the whispers swelled again, louder than ever, as though the archive itself had been wounded by her refusal. The trapped souls shrieked and rattled their cages of parchment, and Lena realized with horror that the archive wasn't merely a library, it was a mausoleum. A prison where memory was currency and suffering the tax. "Keep walking," Ava ordered. "No matter what you hear, no matter what you see, if we stop, we don't leave." Lena's heart hammered, but she forced her legs forward. Marcus was beside her, jaw set, while Ava strode ahead, her movements precise, purposeful, as though she'd walked this hall 1,000 times in her mind. But Lena couldn't help glancing back just once. The golden hall was gone. In its place, a mass of writhing shadows pressed against the broken shelves, mouths open wide. She could still hear her father's voice, fading, pleading, then vanishing into the dark. The archive had taken it back. And as they pressed deeper into the cavern of lost souls, Lena realized the worst truth of all. This place wasn't just a record of the past. It was a graveyard. And if they failed, their names would join the whispers. Chapter 12. The Search for the Files. The further they pressed into the archive, the less it resembled anything Lena could call a library. What began as orderly rows of shelves had become a labyrinth of shifting partitions, corridors folding and unfolding like a living puzzle. Wooden ladders stretched to nowhere. Doorways appeared in walls only to dissolve as soon as Lena blinked. The floor itself rippled as though made of taut parchment stretched over an invisible drum. Every step made her heart pound harder because it felt like they were walking on the skin of something alive. "This place doesn't want us here," Marcus muttered, his voice raw. "It never does," Ava said. Her gaze swept sharply across the narrowing halls, calculating. She looked almost mechanical, her movements precise, as if part of her had learned to navigate this chaos long before tonight. "But especially not now, we're too close." "Close to what?" Lena asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. "The files," Ava said, without hesitation. "The ones at the root. The memories the archive was built to guard. If we can find them, we'll know why it feeds." The word why curled in Lena's chest like a hook. She hadn't let herself think of the archive as anything more than an oppressor, a parasite, but a part of her needed to know. If she could understand it, maybe she could outsmart it. They pressed forward, deeper into the puzzle. Every corner they turned seemed to swallow light. The lantern Marcus carried guttered repeatedly, shadows flaring against his face until Lena had to keep reminding herself he was still human. Still beside her, not another of the archive's echoes. At times, the corridors narrowed so tightly that Lena's shoulders brushed shelves on both sides, the wood cold and clammy like stone. Books swelled outward from the shelves, spines distended as though something inside them was trying to claw free. Some whispered, some sighed, some sobbed so softly, Lena felt her throat constrict. "Don't stop," Ava snapped, dragging them onward. "That's how it works. It slows you down. You stop, you listen, you never leave." But the archive had other tricks than just whispers. Halfway through a corridor that slanted unnaturally downward, the floor shifted beneath Marcus. He stumbled, catching himself against a shelf that screamed when he touched it, the sound piercing like metal on glass. "Get off it," Ava hissed. Marcus yanked his hand back, wincing, and for an instant Lena thought she saw something cling to his skin, threads of ink coiling up his arm like vines. He shook them off, breathing hard. The corridor bent sharply left, then right, then seemed to collapse inward until they were forced into a stairwell spiraling downward. The air grew thicker the deeper they descended, as if every breath had to be stolen from the archive itself. At the bottom, the stairs spat them into a hall Lena could only describe as a vault. Unlike the broken, chaotic chambers above, this one was geometrically perfect. 4 walls, each lined with shelves so tall they vanished into shadow. Every book bound in identical black leather. The ceiling was impossibly high, curving into darkness. The air smelled of dust and iron. Ava's voice dropped, reverent and trembling. "This is it, the sealed vault." Lena's skin prickled. "The files?" Ava nodded once. Everything the archive has hidden, the memories it couldn't let scatter. Marcus scanned the walls. So where do we even start? Before Ava could answer, the vault responded. The shelves groaned, and a single book slid free, tumbling down and landing at Lena's feet with a sound that echoed far louder than it should have. Dust exploded from the impact, but when it cleared, the book lay pristine. Its leather binding shimmered faintly, as if alive. Lena crouched to pick it up before either of the others could stop her. The instant her fingers brushed the cover, the archive surged. The vault dissolved around her. She was no longer in the archive. She was in her childhood bedroom, small, warm, walls lined with glow-in-the-dark stars. Her father sat on the edge of her bed, just as she remembered him in those fractured years before he was gone. "Lena," he said gently, with that exact cadence she'd heard in the Lost Souls chamber. "You're safe now. You don't need to fight anymore. Just give me the book." Her throat closed. She knew. God, she knew. This wasn't real. But it felt real. His hand reached for hers, warm, steady, protective. "Don't," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she meant him or herself. "You're tired," he said, eyes filled with false tenderness. "Haven't you done enough? Let someone else carry it. Just give it to me." Tears blurred her vision. The book in her hands pulsed hot and heavy, like it was part of her heartbeat. Then Marcus's voice cut through, sharp and furious. "Lena, that's not him. Drop the book." The illusion cracked. Her father's voice warped, splitting into static, and suddenly his face twisted, stretching too wide, eyes hollowing into black pits. The room around her rotted, walls melting into paper-thin ash. She staggered back with a scream and dropped the book. The vault snapped back into being. Ava was at her side instantly, gripping her shoulders. Marcus stood rigid, jaw clenched, knuckles white where he clutched the lantern. "They'll use anything against you here," Ava said, her voice like iron. "Anything. You can't let it speak in his voice again. Do you understand?" Lena nodded shakily, though her chest still heaved. Marcus's gaze darted to the shelves. "Then how the hell are we supposed to find what we need if everything we touch tries to eat us alive?" Ava's eyes flickered. For the first time, uncertainty cracked her composure. "We don't search the shelves. We search ourselves. The files aren't random. They're tied to us, each of us." The words chilled Lena deeper than the whispers had. The archive wasn't just a library. It was a mirror. It chose what to reveal based on who touched it. Before Lena could respond, the vault stirred again. More books slid free, 3 this time, falling at once. One landed near Marcus's feet, another by Ava's, the third squarely in front of Lena. They stood frozen, none of them daring to reach first. The whispers rose in the silence. Not the lost souls this time, but something older, heavier. A chorus that spoke from every direction at once. "Read." The word shivered through Lena's bones. Ava's face was pale but set. "We don't have a choice. These are the files." Marcus swore under his breath. "Fine, but we open them together. No one gets lost alone." They exchanged a wordless agreement. 3 people, 3 books, 3 stories the archive demanded they witness. Lena reached first. The cover was cold under her fingers as though it had been carved from stone. When she opened it, light flooded upward, swallowing her vision. Inside was not text, but a memory. Not hers, someone else's. A boy's voice, raw with fear and loneliness. Elliot. And with every word that poured into her, Lena understood why the archive kept these files hidden. They weren't just records. They were prisons. And now, one of them had been unlocked. Chapter 13, ending the cycle. The vault felt like a heartbeat. Not a steady rhythm, but a ragged, sickly throb that made the air quiver and the shelves tremble. Each pulse made dust rain from the ceiling, and each pulse carried the same wordless command through Lena's bones. Finish it. She clutched her book to her chest, though its weight was unbearable now, pressing like stone against her ribs. Ava and Marcus stood close, both pale, both holding their own volumes. None of them spoke for a long time, as though words themselves might trigger the archive's fury. Then Marcus broke the silence, his voice hoarse. "It's him, isn't it? Elliot, the boy? He's the root." Lena nodded slowly. "This whole place. It's his pain, his story, the file that started everything. Ava's eyes narrowed at her book, knuckles whitening. And we have to destroy it, once and for all. The vault answered with a groan so deep it rattled their teeth. Shelves warped outward, black leather books tumbling like dying birds. The whispering chorus rose, dozens of voices at once. Some pleading, some mocking, some weeping. Leave, stay, read, burn. The words clashed like storms inside Lena's head. She shut her eyes and pressed her palms to her ears, but the voices swelled from within. It was Elliot and not Elliot. It was all the trapped echoes feeding off his story. When she opened her eyes again, the vault was gone. They stood in a school hallway. It was unmistakable, though Lena knew it was only an illusion. Lockers dented with graffiti, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air tinged with floor polish. But no one walked the hall. It was silent, sterile, like a memory preserved in ice. And then he appeared. Elliot. He was 15, with a mop of dark hair and clothes too big for him, hanging loose like they'd been scavenged. His shoulders curled inward as though he was trying to shrink himself smaller, to fold out of existence. His eyes, however, when they lifted to the trio, burned with something that wasn't just fear. "Why now?" he asked, his voice both boyish and ancient, fraying at the edges. "Why after 50 years?" Lena's mouth went dry. "Because we found your file. Because you're still here?" Elliot tilted his head, the ghost of a smile flickering. "Of course I am. They made sure of it." The lockers shuddered. For a split second, Lena saw them not as metal doors but as coffins, each one shaking from within. She flinched, but Elliot didn't notice. Or didn't care. "They laughed at me," he said softly, tracing his fingers along the nearest locker. "Chase me. Trap me. And when I screamed, no one came. Not a teacher, not a friend, no one. Do you know what it's like to die with your throat raw from begging?" Marcus swallowed hard, stepping forward. "We're here now. We're listening. We can end it." Elliot's gaze snapped to him. "End it? You think this ends?" His voice sharpened, split. 50 years I've waited. 50 years I've built this place, fed it with their names, their histories. They all came back eventually, and I made them know what it was to suffer. The hall stretched outward endlessly, each locker yawning open to spill black smoke. Shapes lurched out, distorted teenagers with eyeless faces, their mouths torn in frozen screams. The lost souls, the bullied, the forgotten, the erased. Ava gritted her teeth. "You're not free, Elliot. You've chained yourself to this, and you're chaining them too." "They deserve it," he spat. "Every last one." Lena's chest ached. She wanted to argue, but there was a rawness in his voice she recognized, the kind of hurt that never faded, only festered. She thought of the nights she'd cried herself hollow, of Marcus's sleepless anxiety, of Ava's scars she never spoke about. The temptation to agree with Elliot clawed at her. What if erasing the cruel people really was justice? Her eyes dropped to the book in her hands. The cover bore Elliot's name, neat black letters that seemed to writhe now, alive. She remembered the whispers. Every smudge, every tear changed the world above. Destroying this would end him. But was that mercy or murder? Elliot stepped closer, and suddenly he wasn't a boy anymore. His frame stretched, skin graying, eyes burning like coals. He loomed over them, voice booming through the false hallway. "You think you're pure, but I've seen inside you. I know what you've wished. What you would do if no one was watching. Why should you be spared temptation when I wasn't?" The lockers slammed shut one by one, the sound like gunshots. Marcus raised his lantern high, light pushing Elliot back. "Because we don't give in. We don't. That's the difference." The words shook something in the air. The hallway cracked like glass, splintering into shards of memory. Beneath the illusion, the vault stirred back into being. Shelves shivered, books splitting open, releasing smoke. Elliot's figure writhed between forms. Boy, monster, shadow. Lena realized with a jolt, he wasn't asking for revenge anymore. He was begging them to finish it. Her hands trembled as she held the book out. "Elliot, we can end your pain, but you have to let go." For a heartbeat, his monstrous form faltered. His eyes softened, almost human again. Then he screamed, a sound that made the vault quake. The shelves collapsed inward, the ceiling sagging. Ava grabbed Marcus's arm. Marcus grabbed Lena's. The three of them huddled as the archive tried to swallow itself whole. "Now, Lena!" Ava shouted. Lena tore the book open. Pages whipped wildly, blank one moment, filled with Elliot's handwriting the next. She saw everything, his laughter before the torment began, his tears the moment the attic door slammed, the fists, the silence afterward. His whole life compressed into fragile paper. Her own tears blurred the words. "I'm sorry," she whispered and ripped the book in two. The vault exploded with light. The shelves disintegrated. The voices screamed, then sighed, then fell silent. The smoke dissolved into motes of white that rose like fireflies, flickering out one by one. Elliot's form fractured into shards of shadow before dissolving into nothing, his scream cutting into a sob, then into silence. And then, peace. The heartbeat stopped. The vault crumbled away, leaving only the elevator. Its doors stood open, waiting, golden light spilling from within. Lena, Marcus, and Ava staggered inside. None of them spoke until the door shut and the elevator lurched upward. For the first time since they'd discovered the phantom floor, the ride was smooth. No jolts, no shuddering, just ascent. When the doors opened again, they were back in the office building. The hum of computers, the shuffle of paperwork, the world untouched. But something had shifted. The number on the phantom wall, the counter, was gone. Erased. They stepped into the ordinary lobby, blinking under the fluorescent lights. The receptionist gave them a puzzled look, as if they'd just appeared out of nowhere. Ava exhaled first, shoulders sagging. Marcus rubbed his eyes, muttering a curse. Lena glanced back at the elevator. Its doors were already closing. She knew, with bone-deep certainty, that it wouldn't open again. Not in 10 years. Not ever. The cycle was broken. But as they left the building together, their steps slow and unsteady, Lena couldn't shake the echo of Elliot's voice. Not his scream, not his bitterness. Just the faint, broken words that had slipped free in the end before he dissolved. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.